You're looking out over a big chunk of country. There's better than 100-mile radius to your view right now, especially out further towards the prairie here. Not a lot of places left in the country where the air is still clean enough to see more than 100 miles. That's one of the special virtues of this place. But I think the thing that really makes it what it is and makes it different from anywhere else in this nation is you can look out over such a huge view and see so little in the way of human impact. Well, I like to bring people up on the top of the butte here because it gives you a real big view with a pretty short climb. And once you've soaked up the view a little bit, all I gotta say right now is welcome to Montana. And here's still one place south of the frozen Arctic where we can still find a lot of country that's very close to what it once was. My name's Ralph Walt. I'm a naturalist for the Montana branch of the Nature Conservancy. The last name, Walt, is an old German word for the word forest. I like that name. I spend a great deal of my free time and working time nowadays, both in forests. They're some of my very favorite places to be. I've spent the last dozen years or so working at a huge variety of different jobs. But this is the only work I've had that I felt was really meaningful. The preserve sits at the interface between the Rocky Mountains and the prairie. It's in the northwestern quarter of Montana, roughly 60-70 miles southeast of Glacier Park. Let's wander down by this pond here. Okay. It's real fun to take people out that have never seen this country and take them up on places like Pine Butte and expose them to all the beauty that's surrounding them there. It does some things for me. It gives me a fresh perspective at my own backyard, so to speak. We call it Pine Butte Swamp Preserve, but technically the proper word would be a fen. There's maybe 100 or so species that make up the fen itself, and several of those species are very, very rare, which is a big part of the reason why the Nature Conservancy is interested in this place. This whole pond here is an active beaver pond right now. It's going to provide a home for them, but it's going to provide a home for all kinds of other things too. All the waterfowl that come in and nest here in the summer and spring. There's mink and raccoon and muskrat here. We had a real rare thing sighted here this summer. An otter was seen in this pond. That's something kind of special these days. You don't often run into a lot of otter anymore. So there's more here than meets the eye. There's a good population of brook trout in this pond too. And one of the neat things, earlier this spring I was down at the shore of this thing watching an osprey hunt. And he finally hit the surface of this pond right over here real hard. There was a great big splash, and the bird just stayed there. He started flopping around on the water like crazy, and I thought he had a broken wing or he did something when he impacted the water. And he finally got off the surface and took off. He had a brook trout about this long in his talons. It was just flopping up and down and giving him the heck of a time. And that fish was almost so heavy he couldn't get it out of the water. But I wasn't aware there were trout that big in here till the osprey told me that. You'd be amazed at the animals that live down in this swamp. There's things that are rare that you just don't find most other places anymore. Up in the foothills here, there's wolverine. There's grizzly bears living here. There's cougar. There's lynx. All these animals are fairly rare in most other places in the country. Some of these critters are very, very rare. And they're disappearing at a rate that's a little bit scary in most other spots. Here we've got a place where just maybe they can keep going a long, long time into the future, given the right kind of management and the right kind of care. Look at a pretty day we got in there. Oh, it's just nice out here. Nice to see a reprieve from the wind.
What birds breed here on the preserve?
That's a long list. There's lots and lots of...
It's not just migratory birds.
Oh no, there's all sorts of different birds. There's a real abundant passerine bird population here, smaller birds. There's a lot of waterfowl in and out of the water courses here through the course of the summer. Migratory birds stop in, waterfowl and passerine both. And we got a really diverse population of raptors in terms of owls, falcons, and hawks. Resident golden eagles up on the butte here. Prairie falcons breeding up there. All sorts of interesting things. Great horned owl nest just a few hundred yards from us over in the aspens here. And an osprey nest not far from there. There's a lot around here. There's all different kinds of vegetative communities blending together to make one system happen here. There's shortgrass prairie, there's aspen groves out there, there's particular types of vegetation called carr vegetation, which is thick willow and dogwood and other bushes. When you get that big of a mixture of different communities coming together in one area like this, you've got beautiful biological diversity. Well, there's an interesting story behind juniper berries and how this all works here. This stuff's called horizontal juniper. The whole thing here, this big 30-foot circle or 30-foot diameter, is all one plant. This thing's been growing here well over a century to get this big. And there's an interesting story behind all these little blue berries you see it producing here. This particular fruit is surrounded by a real tough protein coat. And for the thing to be able to let those seeds go and for the seeds to sprout, that protein coat has to be broken or otherwise removed. In order for that to happen, this has got to go through the digestive system of a bird. And those strong stomach acids will break that off. And when the bird flies off somewhere, out comes seeds that are ready to go. And so it works real good. The plant sustains the birds that feed it, and the bird replants the plant. So you got a cycle going on here between a plant that feeds a bird and a bird that can enable the plant to reproduce. This plant here is doing this country quite a bit of good in the fact that it's holding and building soil that would otherwise not be there. So that's something worthy to note in this land where the wind almost never stops. Well, this is needle and thread grass. It's a native prairie grass to this country. And there's something real interesting about how this stuff works when it goes to reproduce and plant. These are the seeds, these little hairy-like things here, the thread part, essentially, you could call it, that I just pulled out of the stalk. Come over here and look a little bit closer at this. If you look really carefully at this grass seed, you notice this part is a seed, just the little tip of it. It's real sharply pointed. And this filament back here is real flexible, real easy to bend. And the straight portion that's between the filament and the stem is very rigid, and it's a corkscrew. It's shaped like a spiral to give it strength and rigidity. And so there's three distinctly different parts to this thing. And if you lay this on the ground, in other words, if the thing falls off the plant on its own, and the humidity goes up, or it rains, it will cause the filament to start spinning, like this. And as it spins, this corkscrew, with this sharp pointy seed on the end, will drill itself right into the ground. So here you've got a grass that's planting itself. That's one grass, one seed out of hundreds of species that live here. I don't know the stories behind all the rest, but this is one of the ones that's real interesting that we do know something about right now. We've got out here a big working ecosystem. It's a living community. It's a natural system that we cannot recreate. And so if we lose it, it's gone forever. That's something that's really very much worth considering when we think about why should we save these places and what the heck is the reason for it. To me, that alone is good enough reason. If it's precious and irreplaceable, by God, it ought to be put aside. Pretty old tree, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, it's a beauty.
Still alive, though.
How old a tree is it?
This guy's real old. He's, I would put a guess at maybe around 400 years. Here's a tree that's, you know, scarcely this thick. People would figure 50, maybe 100 years. But out in this country where the growing season is so short and the winds are so hard, these trees grow awful slow. A lot of times rings will average 3 or 4 per millimeter, or the growth rings in these. So you average that out over a trunk that's 2 feet thick, and you got a real venerable old guy here. Something worthy of a lot of respect. He's been through a lot. Been a lot of history transpired under these branches. We've got trees growing on Pine Butte that are alive right now that were growing before Columbus lit on the shores. That's a lot of time. There's some that are older than this one up here. Wonder how many bears have slept under this tree or rubbed up against it. And who knows how many Blackfeet have looked out from under these branches just like we're doing. You never know.
Do the bears actually come up here?
On the butte?
Uh-huh.
Oh, you bet. The grizzly bears move a tremendous amount. They're real nomadic animals. They're big travelers. And oftentimes the home ranges of these individual bears in this area can be upwards of 100 square miles in size. That's one reason you have grizzly bears disappearing from all the rest of the country. Pine Butte Preserve is real unique in terms of grizzly bears because it's one of the very last places in the world where grizzly bears routinely use the prairie. This portion of the Rocky Mountain front in Montana is really the last place where grizzlies venture out of the mountains and out into the grasslands that were once their ancestral homes. The way it is now, it's fine for the bears. In the future, that's hard to say. It depends on how you and I and all our kids manage it for coming years. If this Rocky Mountain front gets developed much north and south of this preserve, there won't be grizzlies in it for long. Grizz give this country some real special magic, and it would really change without them. It'd just be country. It wouldn't be Grizz country. It'd feel tame. The whole feeling about the place would be different. When I'm done working with a group of people out in the field, if I can send those people home with just a little greater respect for nature and a little deeper appreciation for the life on the planet, I think I've done something good, and I've used my time well. That's one of the biggest things I hope to be able to do just through this work, is to be able to spread that respect and that love for the country to other people. As time goes on nowadays, we're losing a phenomenal number of living species from this planet. Things are going extinct right now at a rate that has been never before seen. It's a constantly accelerating rate. We're losing plants, birds, mammals, amphibians, fish, you name it. They're estimating 1 in 5 species that we know today will be gone in another 11 years. That's 20% of all the species we know on this planet in 10 years' time are going to be gone. It's all one unit here on this planet. It all works in harmony. Everything does, all the life forms. If we mess with the system enough and damage its health enough, it's going to affect us very, very seriously. A healthy planet for things to live is a healthy place for people to live. So we're dealing with things that are precious, and with that thought in mind, I think that ought to more than enough fuel our want to preserve places like Pine Butte for future generations.
If you would like to support the work of the Montana Nature Conservancy or wish more information, write us at Montana Nature Conservancy, Box 258, Helena, Montana 59624, or telephone 406-443-0303.
Oh, going for the gold.
Hi, Jason. Hey. You seen Joe?
No, I think he's inside watching TV.
What's this? MCAT? Azula Community Access Television. Productions by local producers? There's gotta be something better than this. I'm getting bored. I think I'm gonna change the channel. No, wait a minute.
MCAT, it'll blow you away.
program is to build a relationship between the museum and the school district, and to add to the children's artistic experience and to give them the opportunity to work with 3 functioning artists as role models, and to provide them the opportunity to see education as an emphasis on process, not just on the teaching aspect, on the learning aspect. And it was divided into 4 segments that reflect the needs of children in their developmental age. And especially 5th graders need to have an active kind of program that involves learning by doing. The Pushkin project was the first of the environmental impact statements. It was designed to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Earth Day. Local artists were allowed to come in and choose a specific piece of paper. They worked in a collaborative way and made their own interpretation of the artwork. They also were able to work on each other's pieces. The pieces were then sent home, and not specifically the piece that they had done themselves, but any artist's piece was sent home, and then it was returned with perhaps 2 or 3 artists' work on the same panel. And the children interpreted these panels of work into a movement piece. They transformed the objects in the piece and the feelings and the expression in the piece through movements that they shared with others, so that they had to really look at it and study it to be able to interpret it in a different way. They transformed it into their own personal interpretation of the artist's work.
Oh, very good. And point them out, why don't you? These are the rabbits. This is road, 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 turkey, gas sign, tree. We are another panel, a whole panel. Oh, that's good. That's great. The panel in the far corner. Is that who you are? Is that the panel? Okay. This is the tree with faces. Oh. This is the horse. And these are the figures, smoking Indian. And this is the youth Derek thing.
The experience was that, number one, they looked at the work in a different way. They didn't just give it an overview. They had to really study and think about what the artist was thinking and think of ways to interpret the feeling. If they were a rabbit, it was a specific kind of rabbit. It was a rabbit that was doing some particular motion. It was a rabbit that posed himself in a special way. If it was a color, they had to interpret the different kinds of blues or the different kinds of red, and why the artist had selected one color in contrast to another color, and how they could show those aspects in movement. The artists in residence were D.P. Warner and Margaret Mudd. Well, the artists explained why and how the techniques that were used. They explained the material and what were the qualities of the material, and many of the children had used pastels and oil pastels. Many of them had not used the folded paper that Margaret Mudd uses in her Fragile Landscapes. They were very interested in seeing how the landscape related to the folding of the paper and how she was able to duplicate the color of specific aspects.
And through the canyon runs Belt Creek. And at different times of the year, Belt Creek has the most marvelous colors. And this is a memory for me of those colors of Belt Creek and the colors of the monarch stone that lays along the edges of the creek. The other thing that's important to me about these pieces, the last 2 pieces, is that they're very fragile. And I call them temporary landscapes. And I call them that for 2 reasons. First of all, they are fragile. They're just paper from my drawing pad with paint on it. And they're kind of exposed. They don't have any protection around them. And they're also a symbol for real landscape, the earth that we live on, that it's very temporary and very fragile. And these won't last unless I take very good care of them or encase them in some way. And the earth isn't going to last if we don't take very good care of it. So I've kind of jumped off into some playing with symbols, and I hope I'm going to do more of that in my work in the future. And now I'll let DP talk to you because he works with symbols a lot in his work. It's very interesting to hear what he has to say.
Hey, Mark. Two pieces that I have. This one back over in this corner. I'm interested in the environment also. And about 4 years ago, my work made a shift and went into more of a political arena. So I consider myself a political artist, bringing out aspects that are around us that I feel are of some concern to me, certainly, but everyone. And dealing with the environment and dealing with the home. I'm raising 3 children now, and I'm introducing them to our world and trying to find ways to introduce them to all the things that we get bombarded with day in and day out through TV and whatnot. And so trying to teach them how to make choices about things. So my images of the home and the house have come out in my work. Now these 2 pieces have been connected in terms of the house. These are objects found in the house. This is a salad shooter. And over here we have a hamburger cooker. Basically, taking that premise of picking an object, I like cause and effect, things that start something and then they create a new situation, they create a different situation, and so on. Well, what I did was I picked an object and I worked backwards. So in this case, I picked a salad shooter and I thought, well, what is a salad shooter used for? To cut up lettuce and all kinds of vegetables for a salad. So I went backwards to where does the lettuce and the vegetables come from? The farm. And thinking environmentally, things that happen on the farm, farmers are using pesticides to spray their plants so that bugs won't eat them. And unfortunately, a lot of the pesticides are very dangerous, not only dangerous to the bugs, but to us. And over the years, they've made large improvements in this area, but there still is a lot of improving needed to be done. And so I took and went back to the farm and had a farmer spraying his vegetables. Well, I took it one step further, and I moved back in time to where they may be making the pesticides, the plant, the factory. And so I created this image. Actually, this is also part of it. And here again, this might be a byproduct of the process in which of making the chemicals. This is what's left over and it gets into the water. And so it's kind of a depressing image. And to give it a little bit of humor, I put it into the shape and picked a shape that we're all familiar with or becoming familiar with, to give it a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek sense of humor. But it's a very serious subject. This piece is less easy to identify the parts. Again, it's very much the same idea, finding different images, moving back into time, looking for the cause and effect. But another element came to play when I was designing this, and that was a little bit of art history. Back in the Renaissance, around 1400, there was an Italian artist named Botticelli who did a piece called The Birth of Venus, otherwise known as Venus on the Half Shell. And this was an image of a woman coming out of a clamshell. Well, I took the hamburger cooker and made the connection of the hamburger cooker and the clamshell. So I needed to have a Venus coming out of a hamburger cooker. Well, I was also thinking in terms of the environment and playing around and trying to come up with the appropriate Venus for this situation. Well, it turned out to be an Amazon for two reasons. Primarily because of the strength that we associate with Amazons, which was a tribe of women warriors, and also because the name the Amazon is the title or the name of a river in South America. Now, there are a couple little clues to unfolding this image. One, notice the shadow being cast. Can anybody identify what that shadow might be?
Like the tree was standing because it was in stone standing.
Very good, very good. You picked two symbols. Okay, this is a tree. And if you look closely, there's a clear cut, a bunch of stumps. All right, so this Amazon is also part of the forest, makes the connection. Another clue, which is much more difficult to find, the shape of this body is the map of South America. So immediately, I'm making the connection of South America and the Amazon. So at this point, hopefully, you're adding all these parts together. And there's one other little clue that I like that actually came out purely by accident when I was making this, but was just the thing it needed, for me anyway. Can anybody find a large dollar sign?
It's the S of the hamburger part.
Right. They have a big S, and then the two lines that would go through are covered by the handles. So each one of these little clues, if you add them together, start talking about the deforestation that's going on in the Amazon region, and the fact that it's being caused for growing beef. They want to grow beef so that we can get more hamburger or steaks or whatever to all the restaurants in the world. And a lot of it is backed by US dollars, so that's the nice thing about the dollar sign for me. But, and it's also the reason it comes back to the hamburger cooker, and the figure being the color of meat. All these little things play in on each other to create the image. Are there any questions? All right. Well, moving over to this. This is the first. Excuse me. This is the first week of the 5th grade program, and what we've done is each class that has come in, which is numbers so far at 5, has taken a section that I've pre-painted, and each student is given the task of making an object that reflects their feeling about the earth. And we use all these found objects, which are non-biodegradable materials for the most part, though there's a lot of materials that can be reused. But it's the idea of recycling. So we're taking recycled materials and trying to make a piece of art out of it. And in turn, we'll attach them to the different discs. And then slowly, we're going to have a family of totems, earth totems. And we'll have dad, mom, and the kids. So we're going to bring in the aspect of the nuclear family into the process. There's one thing about the totem that interests me. The Northwest Indians used them for many reasons, and primarily to introduce a newcomer to their home. There'd be a totem outside the door of their house, their entryway, which describes who lives in the house, and it would describe maybe the occupation of the person who lives in the house. And so it was the idea of the home again, and bringing back an image of mine that I use, the house. Well, the earth is our house also. So to make a symbol of the earth in some way, a symbol to recognize the earth as our house. So I'm making a connection for myself in this process by creating the idea, but I want your help to pull this through. So each one of these objects was an individual project by one student, and then we attached to this. And you start looking at it together, and it starts moving and flowing just by the nature of the materials, the colors, and the diagonals. Your eye starts moving around and moving through it, and you find all these nice little gems. And each one of these has a story behind it. And when we get downstairs, I'll play a piece of music for you and get you started. But as we're putting these together, as we're creating these, I want you to be thinking about a storyline or an idea. For example, this had something to do about fish in a pond, and this was a rain cloud. And so each one of these has a little bit of a story connected to them. And I want you to see if you can make a connection and relate it, this connection, to the earth, our home. Okay, so what we'll do is from here, we'll go downstairs quietly, down into the workroom. There's a room downstairs with canvas on the floor. And what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll sit along the very edge of the canvas.
Okay, now, is there anyone who is ready to talk? Shall I build a little bit so that you can speak? You want to tell us about yours?
This is Mr. Junk, and he goes around and picks up garbage and eats it, and then it becomes part of his body. And so he's like a walking recycling machine.
That's great. Were designed to incorporate critical thinking skills. They use the different levels of thinking. When you're doing critical problem solving, there are basically 4 aspects that you have to be concerned with. You have to have an idea that you are going to think about. You have to have materials that you're going to show the idea. And then you have to have ideas that you are going to use. Thinking skills that involve comparing, predicting, classifying. And then you have to make value statements about that. And each of the pieces on the totems reflected specific thinking skills that incorporated these 4 aspects of critical thinking.
What we're going to do at this point, some of you have finished, and so it'll be a good time to start talking about each project.
Mine's a factory that's been making projects, and they forgot to clean up their mess. They're polluting the air with gases. And they've got a pipeline that's just dumping toxic waste onto the ground. And they're not cleaning it up. And they just set it out in the middle of a farmland.
All right. Are those gases coming out of the top?
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Toxic waste.
Good job. All right. Interrupt. Okay.
We want to build a factory to make better crops for medicine to cover so kids won't open it up and eat it. Imagine and feed those cabbages.
Top factory. That's pretty good. It's a good idea. All right. Anyone over this way?
One of the pipes got broken and it's leaking oil. And the oil is the stuff on the cylinder now.
All right.
Earth is going to become too big, maybe too bitter to even walk outside.
And we don't like it.
I mean, Earth is a pretty good place for us to live on. You can't live on Mars,
with is that they realized that they were artists themselves, that art is not an elitist thing, that everyone has a level of talent. They felt comfortable in the museum. The museum itself was a warm, comforting place where they felt successful. The activities were designed so that everyone would feel successful.
And that's really where I am in my mind right now too, is letting it go. Just like taking a fresh breath and saying, well, what whole new possibilities could life be? Including the fears and stuff, because there's fears there. You know, it's not just that you let things go and, you know, for me it hasn't always been I just let something go and all of a sudden the door opens and the angels gather above the door and it's like, oh, you don't have to walk through. You know, there's a lot of little gnomes or whatever, or trolls along the side saying, you're gonna fall, you're not gonna find anything, you know, life will be hard, life will be bad. Sometimes we hold on so long that we finally say to the trolls, harder than what? Bring it on. We look at that and we say to ourselves, we just observe that. Say, my, how interesting. I went through a lot of pain there to let go. And I really, and what happened when I let go? Well, I felt a lot of freedom. I spent a lot of my life, you know, praying for freedom, and all I had to do was let go. As children bring their broken toys with tears for us to mend, I brought my broken dreams to God because He was my friend. But then, instead of leaving Him in peace to work alone, I hung around and tried to help with ways that were my own. At last I snatched them back and cried, how can you be so slow? My child, He said, what could I do? You never did let go. Letting go. Letting go. Really, with men and with earthly consciousness, with our faith and belief of who we are as earthly beings, the path into joy and fullness and full functioning is blocked off to us. It's totally blocked off. Because we can't receive it unless we receive it from that childlike consciousness. That childlike consciousness, an awareness of our real selves. And perhaps that's what this phase of life is about, is patience and seeing ourselves living alive so that we can live the truth. Because the truth will set you free. And the truth of seeing clearly how I function as a real farcical character allows me to make a new choice. To say, hey, I've made a choice that I need to change. What Ashley Brilliant once said, your reasoning is excellent, it's just your basic assumptions that are off. Why is that funny? Because it's true. I go a lot of places. I've been thinking about humor. Why is humor, why is humor funny? Why are comics funny? Why do we laugh? I really think I know what the psychology of humor is. It is a comedian talks about the things that we don't consciously acknowledge, yet are semi-conscious in our minds. That's all the best. That's a surefire success method for being a comedian. Just talk about things. Why are there so many comics that talk about sex? Why? Because it's a huge area that we just don't talk much about. Why do some of those comics go off in areas like, some of them go off in some pretty, what they call blue areas, because they're areas that aren't talked about. Some of the more creative comics that I believe are creative, like, say, Bill Cosby, particularly, and he still is, but when he was first coming out, and some, there's a lot of others too. They talk about the unconscious that is not so maybe blatant and obvious. They talk about the subtle unconsciousness. It is impossible to make the choices we need to make from the consciousness where we are presently living, believing who we are. That's why everybody says let go. We have to become new. Remember, Einstein said, the significant problems we have cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. So, all the self-help books in the world, as far as self-image work and things like that, it's invalid. Because you can't work from self-image to free yourself from the self-image. You have to let go. That's what Jesus was all about. Jesus said, I'll go for it. I'll go for it. I'll be true. I'll listen. I'll follow that drum that I'm hearing, that drum beat that's just totally unique. I'll follow it 100%. I'll follow it if it means losing my job. I'll follow it if it means not having enough to eat. I'll follow it if it means my wife and kids leave me, or I leave them. I'll follow it if my mother and father are no longer my mother and father. I'll follow it even if the close circle of friends, which I've created for my own support, turn away from me and say, what gear are you in? We don't understand you at all, and we have a strong hunch that you just crossed over into messed up. He said, I'll follow that. I'll follow it if they say, if you don't change it, we will end your physical existence right here and now. We'll move you out of here. Jesus said, to all those questions, he said, okay. Okay, that's all right. Do what you got to do. I'll do what I have to do. I'll be who I am. I'll continue to listen. I'll continue to observe myself in this world. I'll continue to come back. Know who I am. Know who I am. I think part of this thing came from a saying, it was like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Remember that one? You can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can't. You gotta get a new dog. You're the new dog. I'm the new dog. I can't teach the old guy the old ways.